Good morning, friends, and welcome to another time of Wandering Toward Wonder. That time each Tuesday that we take to think about ways that we're cultivating joy and wonder and hope in our lives. My name is Will Ed Green. I serve as one of the associate pastors and the director of discipleship at Foundry United Methodist Church in Washington, D.C. I am tuning in today from my own little slice of home in Brightwood Park in the D.C. area, and I would love to know where you're tuning in from today. So let us know where you're joining in as you hop on this morning or as you're watching later, so that we can celebrate the fact you've been with us. But today, I'm super excited to welcome my colleague and my co-collaborator in all things worship at Foundry, Stanley Thurston, who is our director of music ministries. Some of you will know Stanley. I see we've got Blake with us this morning in Greensboro. I certainly know that Blake knows Stanley. And Stanley, we're so glad to have you with us today. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Will. Good to be here. Hey,
Yeah.
everybody.
Well, one of the things that we talk about here every Tuesday is ways that we're finding wonder. So, Stanley, where are you finding wonder these days in your own life?
Yeah, wonder in nature. It's that time of year where everything is kind of popping up and blooming. So over the years, I have kind of gotten into the perennial type gardening. So they come on their own, each of them at a different time, and say hello and welcome to spring. So just have been watching, the various different flowers starting to bloom or starting to come up. And of course, a lot more birds, a lot of birds in the trees these days. So I have a little couple of I mean, they're doves, and they like my backyard. So they're usually there every morning, and I see them at my breakfast. So that's my wonder at the moment.
I tell you what, it's awfully beautiful. If you've seen pictures of the tidal basin, or if maybe you've got your own cherry tree, I've been so glad to see winter over and spring coming.
Yeah, it's
So,
great to see those. This is prime time. So yeah, I've seen on TV the cherry trees, but actually in pockets around my neighborhood there are blocks of trees. I guess people have said if they weren't going to go downtown, they would have their own, and so they just have like several blocks of cherry trees, which is great. I see
yeah,
them from my car if I'm driving through.
yeah, that sounds amazing. Well, and of course, I know you and you've got much deeper Chicago roots than me, but we share some Chicago history, and it's still kind of winter there, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends. They're warmer actually, but we kind of get some of the weather after they've had it. So I'll call, and if they're saying it's been warm here in Chicago, then the next couple of days is when we'll have a 70-degree day. So
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you. I don't miss those late spring snows.
it can happen at any time. Yeah,
That lake effect stuff is rough.
right.
So, well, Stanley, one of the things that we've been talking about over the course of this Lenten season is lament. And you offered a lecture for us recently at Foundry on the expression and experience of lament through worship music. Why was that topic meaningful for you, or what in your lecture felt meaningful around the conversation of lament and worship music?
Yeah, well, of course, for me, all the music for the previous month had been centered around that topic. So a lot of it had been on my mind for the last 30 days or so.
Mhm.
So yeah, it comes into a lot of the requiem, the masses that we would sing.
Mhm.
So those have just been a part of my history for years and years and years. So it's actually interesting to see how different composers use the same text, to tell that same story about
Mhm.
the lament or Christ have mercy, the sort of crying out. Some interesting things that came up from our lecture discussion were some of the other actually aspects of lament from Congregants of Foundry. So I thought that was interesting. There's a lot of reference to the black music culture or the Southern culture of sort of the lining out of hymns. I don't know if people are familiar with those, or those sort of a cappella type songs that would come up in what we would call the devotion period of worship, which would be kind of like an extended call to worship. But
Mm.
it would be the chance for the people in the congregation to kind of let out their own emotions about something that may have been troubling them, or just a song that they remember hearing from their ancestry. And that was interesting. I had forgotten about that part, but then I remembered, my grandfather back in Chicago, we used to have those quite a while ago.
Well, speaking of both your experience in music ministry over the course of several decades now, and you were raised in a family, right, of musicians and preachers in Chicago. What is your own experience of lament and worship music? And have there been times in your ministry of music over the course of all those years when you've felt that you found music to be particularly helpful in helping people express or experience lament?
Oh, for sure, yeah. Particularly in those times that are, again, very personally troubling. So at times of when we've lost someone in our family, or of course the funeral services, or what we would call the homegoing services, a lot of that would appear in those services.
Mhm.
And well, it's interesting. Yeah, again, we were talking to congregants, even though it may not be something that you're personally going through, you still can join in the story of the struggle that other person might be going through. So it creates a sense of community, to experience it together, or to just that whole idea of it takes a village kind of a thing. Um, you're still going to go into that lament as a support for someone else. So it may not be you lamenting personally at that moment, but you're part of the community, and you want the person to feel that we're all here for you. We're all, here to support you as you travel through this period of lament.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting, right? Because we talk about this sometimes as we're doing worship planning stuff, but hymns have so much memory attached to them too, right? And so even if you're not experiencing lament in the moment, or maybe you are, a hymn can be a window to memory, right? That takes you back to that place,
Right.
and
Right.
lets you remember.
Right. Yeah, the hymns were a big part of our discussion in the lecture. A long list of hymns, and of course spirituals as well, because in that whole period of American history, that was a long period of lamenting, and the songs that came out of that. And as we revisit some of those same songs as an adult, now the meaning is even deeper than maybe when we even first heard the song. Before, it might have just appeared like a song that you sang in church, and it was a congregational hymn. But then when you actually look at the words or the story behind it, you say, well, there's a lot of lament in these words right here that I hadn't realized, or maybe just because again, sometimes they're code songs, so they're not. It doesn't come straight out and say it, but
Mhm.
it's in the undergirding of the song.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was in the lecture. You mentioned something about the fact that when you're singing these words, you're singing them along with people who've been singing them for for years and years and years. And so, whether you're experiencing lament or you're with somebody who is, you're reminded you're not alone. And there's a lot of strength in that, right?
There's a lot of strength in that, yeah. And so even if you're not particularly lamenting a personal thing, you still want to be connected to all that's going on, and you certainly want to, what we would call, build up your timber. I don't know if you ever heard that word, where you're in case you have some lament that's coming, you want to make sure you have all your connections with the Almighty in order, and all of your family connections, strong, because you can't get it right then. It's like you run out of gas, you can't get to the gas station. You got to fill up the gas tank before, so that you won't run out of gas. So I think of that same kind of story. Build up your timber.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about gardening earlier, right? And so there's something about the way that music in particular and singing together helps us build up our soul garden, or tend our soul garden, right?
Yeah,
Uh, so that in those seasons that we need them, the plants or whatever are blossoming or growing.
yeah. You forget even that they're there. Like I said, they're perennial, so they're underground. You don't see anything, but then all of a sudden, there it is, and you're like, "Well, where did you come from?" It's like, I've always been here. It's that same kind of idea.
That's right. That's right. Well, one of the things that came up both at your lecture and then at the class that you offered earlier in the year, particularly around songs of racial justice, or songs that kind of allowed for the expression of lament and the pursuit of racial justice,
Right.
was this idea too that these songs provide points of connection that call us forward too, right?
Right. Yeah, that was another area of the justice songs. And again, we also mentioned that some of them were spirituals or gospel songs where just a word or two was changed to make it a civil rights song or justice song. So everybody knew the tune, you knew the melody, you just changed a word or two. Um, and then even watching, through all of the Black History Month, the specials that would come on television and people talking about it, they would say that very often the songs are what got them through the actual march that they were involved in, or that particular period where they might have been being abused, or police were coming at them, or the hoses, or the song is what kept them going.
Mhm.
Otherwise, they would have kind of turned around and just said, "Well, this is too much. I can't do this."
Right. Well, there's something too about the way that singing your lament reminds you that there's life beyond it, right?
That's true,
And that's so powerful. I mean, the ministry of music sustains us in moments when nothing else can.
right? It is interesting how it touches a place that goes beyond the spoken word, and it can be very personal for anybody that's hearing it in their own way. You don't have there's no special recipe to it. You can respond to it however you want to, and I think that's what makes it so personal at that moment. You could really take it all in, or you could just listen and observe it, or you can relate it to a personal experience, or it's just something that can sort of wash over you as a comfort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a way in which you're singing your prayers, and you're singing your hope, and you're singing your theology, and you're singing your longing, and you're singing your lament, and all of it, right, is a way in which we're connecting to God and connecting to other people.
Right, right. And you don't have to think of the words, because a lot of people, some people don't like to pray, in person because they can't think of the sentences that are eloquent, that would sound, with the cadence of smoothness. But here the words are they're provided, so you don't have to use that part of your brain to figure out a message. There's already a message there, and I think it's really a great asset to have those as part of our cadre of experience, because many writers have taken a lot of time to write it out in such a way that has a nice smoothness and clear message. So they've done the work. You just
Yeah,
enjoy.
absolutely. Well, it's so funny. I had not thought about it until you just said that, but there are definitely moments when I'm feeling particularly uh, uh, without words to say, right? And I can go to the hymns, and the hymns allow me to express what I'm feeling in a way that my words alone never could.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of all of this, I'm reminded that your title may be Director of Music Ministries, but you're a minister of music. I mean, so much of what you do at Foundry, whether it's with our choirs or whether it's simply sitting at the organ and playing, is ministry, right? You're opening up space for people to encounter God in a meaningful way. So what is that work like for you? And why is the music of lament important as a part of that work for you?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that has always kind of fascinated me with this role, because it's something that I think the space opening up space. I think that's a great way to explain it, and that's usually what I'm feeling like I'm doing. But the issue of space is something that is defined differently for almost each person in the room. So one way that you open up space, could be very relative to some people and not relative to others. So I think for me, it's always an issue of trying to present different definitions of that space.
Mm.
Having it to look different. And of course, when I'm hearing comics back, different people will respond in different ways. Others, it didn't. It just went straight over their head. It didn't do anything. Like, I don't know what's going on here, but it's pretty to listen to maybe, but it doesn't really touch them per se. And then I think we all have kind of learned that that issue of grace, where okay, if it doesn't reach me, it may reach somebody else. So everything doesn't have to be specifically for me. But and of course that widens depending on the culture of the church. Some churches actually, you do have more people that are similarly, inclined to like a certain style. But certainly at Foundry, there's a wide variety of styles. So um, I think of it in that way, just the space that will be defined in many different ways.
Yeah. That's it's so powerful and so important, right? That particular work of helping congregations not just create space, but helping broaden space, right? Like, what are some of the ways that you feel like you've helped broaden space in your ministry of music, or expose people to new definitions or new horizons?
Well, I mean, certainly any of the music that comes from my culture. I mean, I grew up in Chicago, as you mentioned, and in a Baptist culture, so I came up with that kind of music, gospel music, spirituals. A lot of the sort of southern, a lot of the folks from Chicago were part of the Great Migration that would have come from the South. So there was that tradition of, as I mentioned, the lining out of the hymns or the metered hymns, songs that would have appeared without a lot of a music accompaniment. They would have been sung a cappella because there wouldn't have been pianos at those churches. But also, of course, coming up in Chicago, in the 60s, where middle America was growing, and there were a lot more, educated folks that were going to college that were part of the culture. So there were this whole exposition to anthems and sort of formal music became a large part of the way I grew up. The way we handled it, of course, then there were different choirs. There would be one choir that would sing the classical, there'd be another choir that would sing the gospel, then another one that sang the contemporary. And they kind of specialized, in their craft and the age group, the youth choir, the young adult, the older. Of course, the anthems are always sung by the older members of the church, but a lot of them were very, very well educated and very experienced. So it was really great quality. So we could hear it all within one service. Now that gets to be a little trickier, I guess, with one choir trying to do all of those different styles. But I grew up. That's part of the way I came up. So I think I bring that, which is just a variety of things. And again, the only difference is it makes it a little more of a challenge because it's one group that now has to learn all these different things.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I so appreciated about getting to work with you and getting to learn from you is that you're always thinking about the thing that nobody else is thinking about, the different style, the different music, the different lyric. And I can only imagine, particularly, in something like music where the words to Amazing Grace never change, but the way that you play it does, right? That always thinking on your toes and being hyper aware of what's happening in a community is important, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, that's again a tribute. I think to the way I grew up. That was the way it was. That was sort of the expectation of the musicians at my church or my school. When I got into high school, I had a African American female director of the choir, a very young lady just out of college, and she had also come from the South, but very well trained. So her point was, I mean, I was playing for the choir at that point, and her idea was, you should be able to play anything that I hand to you, that I give to you. So there was no point of, oh, I don't know this, or I don't know. Figure it out, do it. Just like, so because she could do, I guess she could do it like that without having to think about it. So she thought, well, that's what you need to do too. And I remember I was like, well, can I have a little time? Like, no, just do something. I mean, even if you don't get it all right, just do something now. Don't stop to think about it, or don't stop to say no to it. Just do what it says on the paper, and add whatever you think you need to add to it to make it sound authentic to that particular style. So you're constantly trying to put, well, I wonder what this should sound like. You see the music, but the style of the song is something that the music can't always tell you. You have to add your own to the style. So she wouldn't want you to just play it, but bring something to it that makes it unique to that style. So when you do that for over a long period of time, I guess you have a lot of styles in your mind, and you can sort of pull this one or pull that one or pull that one.
it's a highly empathetic ministry too, though. I mean, I've been privileged to watch you pivot in the middle of a service as things come up or as things change, and it um, is so important. I mean, can you think of a time in particular that stands out for you in which you've through the ministry of music, helped people express or experience lament in that way, in that moment where something happened and you knew you needed to respond?
Oh yeah, many times at Foundry, particularly. I mean, if we were when we think of things that were happening with the general conference and coming back, all of the despair that was occurring, and almost any of those times where there would have been an altar call at Foundry, there would have been something that prompted that, the loss of a close staff person, a member of the church, that had been a part of us for many years. All those things happen without any kind of warning. Like you're just coming to church, you think that day, and then all of this comes, or even after some certain elections. I mean, we had the prayer services after certain kind of tragic issues that were happening in the world. Um, yeah, so I think your antenna, at least for me, I mean, my antenna is just always up and kind of sensing what's going on in the room. Um, and then, of course, it usually kind of comes through the message of the pastors as well. So a lot of it I take, my cue from you all as to, and you're doing the same thing, I think. You're taking your cue from special need within the congregation.
Yeah. Although, there's something to be said about the way, and you said this earlier, music touches a thing that words don't. And so I've even felt myself in worship feeling a shift in the music and responding to what I can feel in the music, right? So there's this symbiosis
Yeah,
between the spoken word and the sung word, the played, the kind of musical word, so to speak, right?
right.
Um,
And I think it comes from a sense of humbleness of the participant of the worship leaders. You certainly have to be open to it because it could very well be happening and the person just ignores it or something. So you certainly have to have a desire to be open to what's going on, and a willingness to be flexible too.
right.
And then again, I guess the more you do, there is a little bit of a fear in that flexibleness because of course, you're vulnerable because now you're entering into something that you hadn't prepared, and it could turn out almost any kind of way. Yeah, I guess as minister of music, I mean, I'm anytime I do that, I'm carrying other people along with me because now the choir is vulnerable, or now the soloist is vulnerable because now we're doing something that we didn't rehearse. So now I put them in a spot where, okay, that's not the way we plan to do this, but now you're right here in front of the microphone, and now you need to change on the spot. Um, and of course, I'm careful, not to do that. Of course, not with every soloist, or kind of check in with them to see how comfortable they are at the moment. And then you take a little bit of a chance because, like, well, it looks like it should be fine. Let's try it, see what happens.
That's yeah.
And
It's
that's when it really is the most rewarding, I think, because then you are the most vulnerable. And I think people respond to that vulnerability, and allows them to open up more to be vulnerable.
yeah. Going back to that whole idea of opening up space, right? It's not just space for God; it's space for us to bring our full selves, right? To cross the
Right.
threshold and be real, um, which is awful hard, um,
And of
especially.
course, it doesn't happen all the time. You can't, it's no magic bullet. You don't know when it's going to happen. You can't really force it. I don't think you shouldn't force it. If it's not happening, it's not happening today.
Yeah,
But it seems to be really clear when it is happening. It's clear that yes, this is the way to go.
yeah. Spirit is doing what spirit does, and you just kind of have to hop on the wave and ride it, right? So, well, Stanley, before we sign off, we want to, if there are questions from folks who are watching, we want to open up the floor for y'all to ask questions to Stanley. But the last lingering question for me is, as you think about, we're getting ready for Easter, right? And so, how does the music of lament, like "Were You There," which we're going to sing here in just a few days, help us experience the fullness of music of celebration, like the Hallelujah chorus, right? And why do we need both? Do you think? In the experience of worship.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of the yin and the yang, kind of idea. It's um, or some people put salt on watermelon. Why do you put salt on watermelon? It's something about the salt actually makes the watermelon taste sweeter because, or people with vinegar, on tomatoes. Um, I think it's something about once you've actually gone into the depth of the sorrow, it makes the happiness, the hallelujah, that much sweeter. Because here again, the sorrow that was happening, on Good Friday, no one knew at that time that there would be happiness. I mean, it just seemed like, well, this is just sorrow. It's just going to go on forever. Like this could be just the way the whole thing ends in this sort of doleful, dread. And then unexpectedly, it's like, no, that's so it's something about that turn of, and it's kind of the spirit thing that you talked about. It's you don't know the outcome, but when it does occur, it just makes it that much sweeter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it mirrors so much of what happens in our lives, right? Like just in the same way that the music can take a shift and Amazing Grace can be a dirge or it can be a song of celebration, right?
Right.
Here's the way that our lives can pivot unexpectedly. And if we're open to it, Spirit can enter in and do something that's transformative.
Right. I mean, that song, Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And I think these are all reminders of kind of the whole reason for walking the spiritual life, because you're saying when you enter something that seems to be of great despair, even to you, and you can't figure a way out of that, there's hope from the experience of other situations and other people that this is not necessarily the way it's going to end. So I think it gives a hopeful message by example.
Yeah. Well, Stanley, for your ministry and for the gift of being your colleague, I am so grateful for all the work that you've been doing to help us pull together virtual choirs and edit music and do all of that kind of stuff. I continue to be so blessed and impressed.
Thank you, Will. Thank you. You as well. You're a very dedicated servant, and you're always willing to go the extra mile and making those pathways clear for people to join in. Hopefully, you see the fruits of all of that, of your work as well.
Certainly, this time has been a gift as we've done that work together today. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So good to be with you today.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
And friends, before we sign off, be sure to thank Stanley and the comments. Reach out to Stanley if you've not had a chance and offer your thanks for his ministry and the choir for their ministry as well. We do want to offer just a couple of quick invitations to ministry as we enter into this Holy Week. If you go to foundryumc.org, you'll find a pop-up on our homepage with all of our upcoming worship services listed. We have Maundy, Thursday service at 7 p.m. on Thursday. There's a Good Friday Facebook Live with Pastor Ginger at noon, and then a creative retelling of the Good Friday story at 7 o'clock along with worship on Friday. And then, of course, Easter Sunday morning, when we'll celebrate the resurrection together on all the various virtual platforms and spaces in which we do that at 11:15. We also want to lift up really quickly, there are a couple of events coming up quickly that you can register for now. So our women's retreat, virtual women's retreat, is going to be April 16th, 17th, and 18th. We're excited to welcome the Reverend Chinda Lee from Fairlington United Methodist Church, who will be our keynote speaker. You can register online using the link that we've dropped into the comments now. Our spring Great Day of Service, where we'll be packing food for Rise Against Hunger, will be that Sunday, April 18th, on the Foundry Plaza, observing all of the various social distancing and safety protocols that we need to, and including masks and hand sanitizers and that kind of thing. So if you'd like to register to be there in person, you can do that. There's also a virtual option to support the Great Day of Service. So check out that registration page, get a little more information, and figure out how you might plug into that important work. And then finally, we just want you to know that we're getting ready to launch a whole new suite of online learning opportunities and classes for adults. We're going to drop a link in the chat now where you'll see all those listed through the summer, with a couple of things that have yet to be made live that are coming soon, including another opportunity to learn and grow with Stanley and several other ministers of music in the area. So we hope you'll check out all those links. We hope you'll get connected. Be sure to continue joining us throughout the week on Facebook. We'll be sharing information about how you can engage in community and growth at Foundry. And until next time, friends, remember, be gentle with yourselves, trust and know that God loves you and we love you, and keep on wandering toward wonder. Until next time, take good care. Bye-bye.